Hi, this is Manjula Narayan, books editor, Hindustan Times, and I'm with Rashmi Saksena, who's written this really interesting book, She Goes to War, Women Militants of India. It's really gripping, and it's got all these, stories, deep stories about women who've taken a path that's very unusual for, for womankind. So, Rashmi, tell us about how you got started on this book.
Well, I actually started my work only about 3 years ago. But I must confess that I was intrigued by by these women, mention of these women, which for the last, say, probably 20, 25 years, over various assignments, which had nothing to do with militancy or women in militancy, I would hear about these women. I'll give you an example. Once I'd gone to cover elections in Madhya Pradesh. And I was just sitting in one of the remote areas, and at a tea shop was this poster, and it had the photographs of 3-4 women, and it was obviously a Maoist leaflet, and it said, "We salute these comrades who laid their lives in an ambush." I just looked at it and I just thought, oh, so they have women doing this also. But then my story was something different, and I just sort of forgot about it. When I went to cover the floods in Kashmir in the last about 10, 12 years ago, I would travel to remote villages, and people would talk about, how the militants and militant outfits were handing out relief. So I said, and who's doing it? And they said, oh, the women they know. So, there was all these references. I'd gone once to Andhra to do a story on the handloom weavers, the plight of the handloom weavers. And a lot of them told me that, the houses which are not really affected, the families, are the ones whose daughters have joined the Maoist camp.
Oh, okay.
So these references were there. Then over the last few years, in fact, right after the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi, where there was this woman who was the bomb, Dhanu. Yeah. And then she had an accomplice, as we know, Nalini was another woman. Yeah. And I'd also done reporting in Sri Lanka, where the LTT really hadn't come into force. This was the Elam period.
Yes.
And I saw that the women were actively involved even in their underground activities, distribution of leaflets and things. So I knew that, there was the role, a very crucial role played by women in all these insurgencies. But then, how we reporters work, your assignment is something else and you just forget about it.
Yes.
And then when I started seeing at the international level, the Paris bombing and etc., you had women who were really playing such a crucial role. This woman who had the vest on, in Paris. So I thought to myself, it's time to, start looking at these things. And I started talking to the agencies involved, and everybody said, yeah, women are there. But there was really no statistic, nothing to say who these women were. And I thought to myself, who are these women who come from the so-called, they are non-metro women, who choose a path which is actually different from the conventional one laid out for women in their area.
Yes, yes.
And they dare to do all
laid out for women in general.
In general, And they are doing all these things. Who are these women? Why do they get into insurgency? What is their life like? What happens when they surrender? Or when they come, Chhattisgarh, we always nowadays hear, or there's been a mass surrender and so many women.
Yes.
So I used to wonder, what happens to them? How do they come back? Such women have intrigued me right from the day I started hearing about them. But it's only now that I found the time to sit and work. And then I realized that finding them was so difficult. First they were...
Yeah, because the legwork to do these things must have been a lot. I mean, you interviewed 100 women.
Well, I met about 100.
You met about 100. So the background of this research that you did must be, of course, it's like an iceberg. You just see the tip. Right?
Yes, and the more women I met, I realized there was so much more. And I said, no, I can't write about all of them.
Yeah.
So I tried to pick up women who would represent the society they were in, the region they were operating, and also tried to bring out the sort of work they do for their organizations. And the main thing, Manjula, I wanted to bring out in this book was, of course, about the women. But the other thing I feel, and I hope the agencies involved, the official agencies, would now start looking at these women as people who need to be studied. If you're going into counter-insurgency program, you must know about these women, how they operate, what do they do, and also why do they get into insurgency.
Yeah, the motivation. Why do they do that?
See, Manjula, across the board, I feel women get into these movements because they have a perception, whether it's right or wrong, we are not getting into that, that injustice is being done to their men. The husband, to their men. The husband, the brother, the father,
Yes.
you know, somebody. Police atrocity, what they think is atrocity, or army operations where the men have been beaten up or they have died or been tortured is really something which makes them leave their hearth and home and come into these movements. Of course, a lot like, say, for example, in Nagaland, there's a lot of ideology involved, but that also, the factor that really pushes them into it is this, that how can our men be beaten up? Why are they doing this? Why are they putting our villages to fire? For example, in Chhattisgarh, why do these women who are so innocent and they are tribal women get into this? Because they've seen exploitation in their villages by the forest guard or by the police. And they feel this land belongs to me. Why are we being denied this? And that's what the Maoist ideology feeds into.
Okay.
Because this is what the Maoists tell them, that this is your land, you need to fight for it. So in Chhattisgarh also there is a mix of ideology. But in all these areas which I covered, like Assam, Nagaland, Manipur, Jammu and Kashmir, and Chhattisgarh, ideology quotient differs from place to place, and also the way they operate depends on the society and social milieu they come from, So
yeah, you've brought that out. That's what I found fascinating about the book. Each of these social milieu, you've highlighted how women in that particular society react to a certain stimulus. Like the women in Kashmir come out as very different from the women in the tribal.
Manjula, we must, let's look at the two societies.
Yes.
In Kashmir, you have a society which is male dominated and orthodox from our point of view, where the women are not expected to ask for gender equality. And the women themselves accept that, whether it's because they feel it's their religion or their social demands, the society demands that, and they're happy to a great extent. It's the accepted thing. Now, when we move to Chhattisgarh, it's a tribal society where, to a great extent, there is gender equality in a way.
Yes, that comes out a lot. I mean, they seem much more liberated than anybody in any city, big city in India.
That's true.
Honestly.
Now, I'll give you an example. Talking about Chhattisgarh. When I started this book, I had this perception and picture in my mind that these were victims, these were innocent girls who were forced or lured into these organizations, and then they were exploited sexually, etc., etc. So my questioning also, when I spent time with them, started on those lines. And I remember there's one very attractive, sexy-looking woman, and I asked her, I said, you said that you joined the organization and went into the camp when you were only 17 years old or 18 years old. So, guys must have been, very attracted to you, and were you forced to sleep with them. So she looked at me and said, forced? Why? So I really didn't have an answer to that. So then she said, but in our society, we decide, the men and women, who we want to sleep with. And if I say no to a man, the man accepts it. So see the difference. They come from a society where they have dormitories, which we call, as you know, the hotels, where the young boys and girls go and spend time. And then when they spend time with each other in that dormitory, they decide who their partner is going to be. So it's...
So that's carried over into the camps.
Yeah, into the camps, because that's what they understand. In fact, there's one woman who said that she ran away and joined the Maoists because her father wanted her to have an arranged marriage.
Oh, but that's very unlike.
And she said, but that's not our culture, so why should I have to... She was revolting against this. Now, when you come to Srinagar and Kashmir, that's not the sort of society
At all.
At all.
Very different.
And most of the girls and the women who are doing this work, see, they don't live in camps.
Yeah.
In Kashmir, the women are part of what the establishment calls overground workers.
Overground workers. Yeah.
So they stay in their homes or in their wherever they are, and in a secret manner they carry out this work. And who do they carry out this work for? It's not, there's no ideology involved in the sense of belonging to a group, or an organization. All of them say, we are doing it because hamare bhai ne bola. Now, who is the bhai? The bhai is a jihadi who's in POK.
Okay.
Or my father, or my uncle, or my husband, or a guy she's in love with.
Okay.
So they are actually handled and driven by individuals.
Okay.
And their loyalty is to that individual.
Okay.
And on a broader macro level, their loyalty is to jihad. They feel they are doing a religious duty.
Okay. Which is not the case in, say, Nagaland or Manipur.
No, there's a difference between
Yes.
the two.
So just,
yeah, okay.
like from the point of view of mainstream India, like it's, we have this, anything beyond the mainstream is a shadow zone for most people.
Yeah.
So explain the nuances of the differences between, female militants in Nagaland and say Manipur,
See, again, let's not forget what the society is in Nagaland. Nagaland, Manipur, etc. There's a lot of gender equality. There is no inequality in their society. The roles may be very well defined, that the women will do this and will not do this. But otherwise, there's no such a thing as suppression of women, And Manipur, you must have heard how the women have always been in the forefront of agitations.
That's true.
AFSPA
agitations and
everything. So it's for women from these areas to go into these organizations and underground and into camps is considered daring, but it's not frowned upon. Let's look at it like that. So in Nagaland, a lot of women are driven by the ideology in some of the major organizations, which now are actually overground, like the NSCM, which is the Isaac Moiva group. They, in fact, actually have a government in exile, and they are in the peace talks, as you know.
Yes.
And these women, now that they've left those militant camps, work in their offices. They work as regular, assistants, accountants, secretary, etc.
Civil service.
Yeah, it's like a civil service. But they continue to go once a while for arms training.
Okay.
Because they have an army unit also.
Yeah.
But what has happened over the years, that in Manipur especially, also in Nagaland to some extent, and even some groups in Assam, they have become groups which call themselves militants and are fighting for a cause, but their main business is extortion.
Yeah, you bring that out in Purnima's story.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Manipur one.
And more so in Manipur, as I said, their entire business is to amass money. through extortion or through kidnapping, even just by fear that, look, you're going to be safe and you have to give us so much money, otherwise we come and burn your home or your shop or whatever. So you have a number of groups. Manipur has something like 17 to 18 or even more militant organizations now, which are banned. Now all of them, to some, as I said, the ideology quotient differs from region to region, organization to organization. But one thing common, which I've said earlier, is women feel that if injustice is done, they must give up their traditional role and fight.
It's like, this is the final thing. My God, how could they do it to my brother? Or,
And
now I
Manjula,
can't
they
shut up.
make
Exactly.
very good fighters.
But I found that only in Chhattisgarh they could actually do this. Because the others are still kind of, I mean, they're still impacted psychologically and
Where?
socially. Like, the Chhattisgarh women seem to be able to leave this life much more easily.
Yes, that's true.
You know?
Because also, there's no stigma attached to the fact that they've lived in a jungle for 5 years in a camp. So they come back to their normal life, or most of them marry people who they call comrades, who've been with them in the camp. You
So
know,
there's an understanding there.
there's an understanding, and their society doesn't frown upon it at all. You know, it's not like, oh, this woman has lived in a jungle with men, so there's a stigma attached to it. It's not like that in Chhattisgarh at all. Again, because of the social background they come from. And most of the men they marry, as I said, are from their own camp and comrades. So there, not only is there an understanding, but both of them leave and they know what are the terms and conditions.
Okay.
You know. See, the one thing is very interesting is that in these Maoist camps, the men are all sterilized.
Yeah, I know. I read that bit in your book
Yeah.
and I was like, what? This is like really something else.
Which means-
But it's reversible now, which is how
Which is reversible.
they have children.
And they are paid money to get this reversed once they get married and leave camp.
Oh.
So there are two reasons for it. I spoke to one of the leaders as to why this is done. And he said, one, that we cannot afford to have children in the
Running
camp.
around in the camp.
Because they are moving.
Yes.
You know, they don't stay in a camp for more than, say, 2 nights or whatever. They're moving all the time. And there's it's, you know, they're at war all the time. So you can't have children there. Which leads you to the fact, to believe that sleeping with comrades, etc., if it's by choice, is again not frowned upon.
Yes.
Which again takes us back to
The kind of
life
freedoms
freedom,
in that society.
which is given is a license by the society. So you can't. The same thing doesn't happen in Kashmir.
Yeah, that story of Ruhi was very tragic. I
Yeah,
mean,
in fact, I want to read that little bit to you, if I may. You know, where this girl Ruhi, when she went to this camp in POK, how they were exploited. And she says it all without actually saying anything. You know, she tells me that they were confined as prisoners in separate rooms. The trainer would drop in whenever he wished. उसके आने को हम रोक नहीं सकते थे. She says we couldn't stop him from coming. Says Ruhi, and then her eyes are now downcast, as if she's ashamed of what happened. She holds up her hand as if pleading that I don't ask the obvious question. आप भी औरत हैं और मैं भी. You are a woman and I am too, she says, in an appeal for understanding and sparing her from detailing her humiliation. So you can see
yeah.
that, you know, what she must have undergone. There's no need for
in
us
POK,
to...
in the camp.
Because that's a society where a woman doesn't have the right to say no to a man. That's the way the society is. It's all nothing to do with only being...
In a conservative society.
Yeah, I mean, and that man, and even, it was not only in POK, she told me even the groups which had taken her to this place, the men over there didn't, you know, see them only as comrades, as the Maoist camp. For them, the gender issue was very important. Here was a woman who you could use.
Anyway, okay, so this is, I found this like fascinating reading, and the stories of all these women, I mean, you brought them out with their context so well. And I think everybody should go out and buy this book, because it gives you a perspective on women who, are very different from us.
Yeah, very different.
And like we were discussing, in many ways much more liberated, at least the ones from Chhattisgarh and from Nagaland and Manipur. I found,
Manchana, very much like us, also, in spite of being very different.
Yes.
Because they are sensitive people. And the other thing which I want to bring out in this book, and I hope I can, is that women make great militants and whatever, but they are the biggest constituency for peace. They don't want this killing and ambushing and all this to just go on. They want life to come back to normal. There's a family, there are children, they have the right to go out to work. So I feel if agencies are looking at bringing an end to insurgency, you have to have these women in peace talks. And you'll see that whenever there is a surrender or there is a peace talk going on with the government, the women are absent after playing such a crucial role in keeping the
action,
and keeping the insurgency alive.
Yes.
You know.
So I hope somebody out there is listening to even this aspect of it, apart from, reading this book to have a greater understanding of these women and these insurgencies, which are happening in various parts of the country. So do go out and get this book, She Goes to War, Women Militants of India by Rashmi Saksena. And share this video, and we'll see you again next week on Books and Authors.